So nice to meet you all. And
Yeah.
I'm feeling quite sunny as well today. Not a reflection of the London sky, but more of being happy to share some of our research and insight with your community.
Yeah, I forgot to share my weather analogy. Yeah, I'm feeling like the weather outside at the moment. So here in Horsham, it's cloudy and a bit chilly. But I'm also very excited about the next hour together. Okay, off we go.
So the first part of this webinar is about sharing some of the insight from the research we did for EthicalFin last year around the impact investment ecosystem. And so as part of this mainly qualitative research, we put together some user personas to reflect the different types of profiles that we can see on the impact ecosystem. So founders on one side and investors on the other side. So today we are mainly going to talk about the founders' profiles, but we'll share the slides with the details of the investors, and you can see, you know, who you match in terms of profile as an investor. So for those of you who might not be familiar with user personas, they are kind of hypothetical archetypes of your actual users when you are an organization or as an investor as well. So they're different from customer segments, which are often defined by social and demographic criteria. And because personas are really more about people's needs, people motivations, pain points, and goals. So this is the overview of the 7 persona we created for EthicalFin. And so we have basically 2 entrepreneurs with different level of maturity on their managerial journey, and also different levels of impact leadership. On the other side, so the investor side, so we have also a diversity of investors' backgrounds and needs with those 4 personas. So they actually come from different types of financial institutions, and their attitudes, their needs are actually driven by the governance of the fund they represent, but also their personal values and their alignment with, you know, social and environmental impact. We also created an influencer persona, which is also important, especially when we come to you know, communication and PR strategies. So if we go to the first entrepreneur, Chris. So Chris is your typical impact CEO and founder. So he's probably come from a family of entrepreneurs as well from different sectors. And he's been through a lot of entrepreneurial projects. And his latest one would typically be a tech with a great impact potential. And he's really leading the venture from the founding stage. So he is really dedicated to making a lasting impact. And also he has to, you know, manage the stress, which comes with the thrill of the job. His objectives and motivations are really to tackle, you know, one of the big environmental or social problems we can see in the world and have a huge impact. So he wants to scale the tech and build amazing teams. He loves working with people, with his team. And also he loves the strategy and also pitching to investors. His challenges are always around, you know, time management and prioritizing stuff, going through his massive to-do list. So it's quite stressful. In terms of fundraising, so he knows that it never stops and it happens on top of, you know, all the other things that he needs to do to run the business properly. And so he has to deal with a lot of uncertainty, you know, always having to find the right strategies and go to markets. And he's also, in terms of, you know, his relationship with financial advisors, he's also quite wary of the potential business models and not getting value out of it. The last element of the persona that we've introduced, and maybe Alessandro, you can say a word, is the Barrett leadership level, where he's really at the top in terms of contribution. Alessandro, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, very briefly, we came across Richard Barrett and the Barrett Value Center. And what they've done is they've created methodologies to measure what we believed to be, unmeasurable. So they have created, systems to measure values, to measure culture, consciousness, in individuals, but also in organizations, and they've expanded their application also to countries. So I recommend you have a look at that. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to map the profiles on this leadership level. And yeah, Chris is definitely at the top, doing his best to contribute. And the same goes for the other profiles that we have put together. So the next entrepreneur profile is Nick, the caring manager. So he is he became the CEO after spending quite a long time in the business. It could have been the CFO before. And he also comes from a more traditional corporate world, so potentially banking. But then he shifted his career path to a more purposeful mission. So he loves having a positive impact on people's lives and helping his team grow as well. His key objectives and motivations is making an impact on people's lives by scaling their technologies, be seen and perceived as a caring person by his friends and also teams. And he does need support, from advisors on making the right connection and expanding the business more than the kind of comms or strategy where he's quite experienced. Sorry, Mariam, yeah, thanks for muting. And then he has to define a clear innovation strategy as well. Pain points, staying focused, and even if he knows that he can't control everything, of course, he has a lot of stress to manage. The fundraising cycle never stops as well, and is constantly on his agenda. And then he has a lot of challenges managing the HR and the people issues. In terms of his leadership level, so he's further down, but he's still in the upper side of the ladder in the alignment stage. So he's already aligned his purpose, values, and work. So that's it for the two founders profiles. Again, if you want to look into the impact investor profiles, we'll send the information. So we can go to.
So we'll just skip through this, Marie.
Yeah.
But we plan to share with you the presentation so you can have a look without any problem. Okay, so we will now move into a quick overview of impact investing. So we'll lead through that. So briefly, impact investing as a term apparently came up in 2006 following an initiative by the Rockefeller Foundation. But you can imagine the roots in the early investments by religious organizations. The most official definition of impact investing is investments made into companies, organizations with the intent to contribute to measurable, positive social and environmental impact alongside financial returns. But we also, as an organization, have decided to come up with our own definition. And add the word conscious, consciously. So consciously allocating resources, so not just investing of capital, but also time and energy, for instance, into a broader set of initiatives. So not only companies, but also projects and funds, for instance, that contribute to the sustainability of our society, both within and in terms of its balance with the natural environment, and simultaneously achieve adequate financial returns. So at market level, I would say. So there've been a number of ways of defining impact investing, and more broadly the world of sustainable investments. And this table, I think, is quite interesting in giving a good overview of the various, let's say, stages and sectors. So looking at the focus and the impact intention. So on the left-hand side, you have traditional investments where there is no specific regard to the environmental, social, and governance factors of those investments with an agnostic impact intention. Then we have the broader sustainable investments world, which is divided into the sort of more formal ESG investing, which stands for, as I said, environment, social, and governance issues, where you have the lightest touch, exclusion. So, investors that exclude specific companies or sectors to avoid risk or because they're disaligned with their values. Then there is ESG integration, which means that the investment decision process takes also into consideration ESG factors. And the sort of the more advanced stage is where investors actually screen companies and industries, looking for those with the best ESG performance. Next is sustainability themed investing, where you have investment funds which are targeting specific sustainability themes, like water, energy resources, etc. And then impact investing, which is, in my personal opinion, at the core of how finance should really operate, and we defined it before. Further on the right is venture philanthropy, which means investments that, like impact investing, target social and environmental positive impact, but at the same time deliver below market returns. And all the way to the right is philanthropy, which is grant giving only for positive social and environmental impact and no expectation of financial returns. Now, from our experience, we really believe that impact investing is not just an asset class, but is really the only way that finance should operate, and is all connected to our level of awareness and consciousness in how we allocate our resources, so financial and non-financial resources. In terms of the global outlook for the sustainable investing asset class, the sector has been growing very, very fast. Currently, according to the Global Sustainable Investment Review, there are over $35 trillion in sustainable investment assets, which represent approximately 40% of the global asset under management. The US and Europe represent 80% of that. But interestingly, Canada is a market leader in terms of the highest proportion of sustainable investment assets. You might have seen, press coverage around how COVID-19 has really raised, the alert and the attention level, both in terms of how our economic activity is impacting the environment. I'm sure you've seen the photos of large industrialized cities, pre and post COVID, but also it has accelerated the scrutiny by investors and stakeholders and regulators on how companies treat all of their stakeholders. Another piece of information that I think is quite interesting is that there's been a lot of research around how sustainable investing funds perform versus traditional investing. And Morningstar has recently finalized a research that demonstrated over 5 years, the average annual return for a sustainable fund was 7.3% as compared to 6.1% for traditional investing. On the right-hand side, we have we're showing the allocation of capital based on the previous table. And quite interestingly, you can see that impact investing still represents a very small fraction of the total, which really brings to the question that, what can we do to, to change the status quo and the situation? And, Marie, came across this very beautiful quote from Mark Kearney very recently, which, he said that, by COP26 in November, the world will know which banks, asset managers, and asset owners are part of the solution to climate change and which remain part of the problem. So I think, now is the time to really draw a line and, take a stance for allocating resources, with a very clear conscience in promoting sustainability. We now move into this, the discussion and the presentation around how to identify and select the best impact deals. And this is really based on our empirical experience over the last 6 years at EthicalFin. So we have identified 4, we call them pillars, so 4 main areas of analysis and due diligence in order to identify those organizations, those companies that can have the highest impact possible in promoting sustainability. So the first pillar is people. I think it's the most important one. So it's all about identifying those entrepreneurs which are visionary change makers who are motivated by very clear social and environmental purpose and very beautiful visions of how they imagine, the future. Of course, the entrepreneurs work, in very cohesive and very successful teams, and they have to demonstrate the ability to execute on their plan. We want to see a balanced management board relationship, so in terms of governance. And at the end of the day, it's all about finding, the right resonance with each other. So that's, what we look for ourselves, and that's what I think investors should also look at, in addition to the quantitative elements and the track record of the people. The second pillar is innovation. Innovation in terms of either a very disruptive technology that can be defended, ideally with intellectual property protection, which feeds into, of course, a defendable business model. But also it can be innovation in terms of very innovative and regenerative, business models. So how the organization operates. Third point and third pillar is all about the impact. So how the organization, the company, and the leadership team, and the founder are consciously and significantly impacting on the improvement of the status quo. So typically we look at what is the status quo of the specific industry or the solution that the company has developed. It could be, imagine, clean energy, or in health tech or agriculture, for instance. So what the organization and the technology does in improving the status quo, and therefore how does the organization and their solution help shift the direction of the development of our society and our business towards sustainability. Last but not least, but more, let's say, as a consequence of the other pillars, we want to also see a very attractive and globally scalable business model. So, of course, the economic model of the organization becomes fundamental in understanding how the strategy comes together, how the go-to-market strategy is credible, what early traction is there with early adopter clients in order to establish a credible business plan for the future, which of course leads to an expectation of financial success and high growth. And we see profit, therefore, as a natural consequence of the other pillars. So all of them, we believe, operate in unison and are all equally important. And we typically assess where the company is on each level. One element that always is very important for impact companies is the purpose of the organization, which is also in our opinion connected to the purpose of the founder, the role of the founder and the source of the organization. And in this respect, we've come across an organization called Blueprint for Better Business. I don't know if you have already come across them, but they are a charity in the UK, which is focused on promoting the development of very clear purpose in any organization, also promoting the clarity in purpose for very large blue chip organizations. And so they have created a framework which we like to refer to when we come across organizations, and we look at assessing the purpose of the organization. And two fundamental elements in defining the purpose of the organization is, first of all, the fact that each person is a someone and not a something. So organizations that do not really use people as a means for achieving business objectives. So focusing on the dignity and the value of people. And secondly, at a societal level. So how does the organization deliver value and how does it serve society at large? So taking care of the common good. So genuinely aiming to promote the good of society as a whole through the provision of goods and services that benefit the society. And so, you can see how, this can really become a very important element of analysis of organizations, whereas, the sort of the mainstream and let's say capitalistic model has been focused on most times and oftentimes using people for profit maximization and creating goods and services that only benefit typically the shareholders of the organization. Now, this is all nice and good, but how about the decision making and the behaviors that the organization use in order to build a purposeful organization? So the blueprint has identified 5 areas which are very, very important. So the fact that people matter, so the concept of solidarity, freedom with responsibility, so in terms of subsidiarity, the importance of trust and trusted relationships, so how the organization operates within and in its ecosystem, and so the concept of reciprocity. Another element is diversity and building bridges, therefore plurality. And then last but not least, as you can imagine, sustainability. So taking care, in a stewardship way of people, values, and resources. So we believe that these are very, very important elements for making emerge the best purpose in business. So here we are. This is the end of the presentation. Maybe I should stop sharing, and we can open up the panel for any comments or considerations. I don't know if Marie, you have anything to add?
No, I think, I was going to say the same. If you have some comments or things you want to share on your own due diligence approach or questions around what of the research or the due diligence process presented by Alessandro. So the floor is yours, basically. And we need some brave people to go first, as usual. And you need to unmute your. Maybe you can, unmute yourself and ask the question, because I think it should be manageable. Or put your question down in the chat as well.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, my name is Annika, and I'm the youngest first female and first undergraduate president of the SOAS Impact Investment Society. I would love to know the presentation. I'd firstly love to know if the presentation will be available after the webinar. And I would also love to know what your views are on the current diversity within the impact investing sphere.
Alessandro, for you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Annika. And very good questions. Yeah, so on the on the presentation side, we will be very happy to forward to you the slides after the presentation. So no worries there. And we will also share the recording. Regarding diversity, I think that's a very interesting question. So from my point of view, I think that at the core of impact investing is actually also promoting much more diversity. Now that doesn't mean that capital is actually necessarily flowing towards more diverse and organizations, and in order to promote diversity, but there are a very large number of initiatives within the impact space that are really looking at promoting diversity. So let's say on a regulatory point of view, there is a lot of pressure already from the regulators in increasing ESG quality in organizations and in listed companies. So the governance side poses a lot of emphasis on the diversity side, which means that there is a trend for an increase in women and minorities, being represented at the board level. In terms of promoting, more diversity, I'm aware of a number of either angel groups or impact funds or initiatives which are specifically tailored and targeting the development of innovation and startups led by female founders or led by minority founders. I think that's extremely important. Or also initiatives that are fostering more and more diversity. I see that a lot in also in the philanthropic space, where there are philanthropic initiatives that try to make services or products or environmental solutions more accessible, either to specific sectors of society or in countries which are developing countries. And so I think that there is, let's say, room for optimism, and it's very nice and it's very encouraging to see how many leaders are coming up with initiatives in that respect.
I think that was a really good question. And if I can speak more on the female founder angle, so, and just the overarching minority representation, I think, yes, we have to just acknowledge that we're nowhere near where we need to be in the representation of minorities and females in the investment landscape, but also in the founder and who gets the funding landscape. So we still have to work hard to advance that representation and to talk and keep talking about it for sure. So yeah, keep on the good work. And I'd say also from the female angle, we also did some research on, women and impact investment. And we found that women are, generally more likely to align their values with their investments. So I think it's a really good call for investors to inspire more careers from females in that space, and to help those who are already in there, move up the ladder and have more influence in investment decisions, basically. So that was my personal message to this
Yeah,
audience.
thank you, Mary. Very good point.
Hi, Alessandro. Thank you very much for the presentation. Can you hear me? I've been impacted by your presentation. We have been talking for a while, and this is the first time I finally participated into a webinar of yours. And my question, I was really impressed by the dignity value of people on the subject of dignity. Can you give me maybe an example of a specific example how a company can implement this value?
Okay, good question. Let me think about that. Well, dignity is so it's I would consider that as the way that people are treated. So some examples that come to mind are first and foremost the level of salaries. So there are some organizations that move away from the minimum salary to minimum living wage, which takes into account what is the cost of living in the specific city. And also I imagine anything to do with the way that internal communication and internal relationships are built. So the typical relationship between the management team and the subordinates people, it's you can see some unhealthy examples of the boss sort of directing their employees, giving very specific tasks and demanding very specific tasks, as opposed to empowering as a leader the employee and involving the employee in the decision-making process. So I think it goes also to the level of respect that the management team inspires vis-a-vis their employees. So both let's say top down, but also across the organization. So with the idea of moving more and more towards flat organizations where each individual has the same dignity as a person, but of course contributes differently based on their role, responsibility, experience, and skills. So that's what comes to my mind. But I would be very happy for other people to share their own ideas as well on this topic. You, Mario, yourself as well.
Thank you very much. For the moment, I'm not talking. I think your explanation has been very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Feel free to unmute or just put them through the chat.
Can I risk a sort of a challenging or provocative comment a bit?
Yes.
Of course.
Go for it.
I will kick you out if I don't like it.
We can always mute you, yeah.
Exactly.
Button.
No, I wanted to ask you, is sustainability not a preoccupation for rich people or rich countries? What do you think?
So it's a preoccupation only for rich countries, yeah?
Yes, it's basically once you've got what you need to live and have a comfortable life, then you start thinking about sustainability. That's a little bit in this order. What do you think?
Interesting.
I can take that question if you want, and thanks
Sure.
really for asking. And I will probably answer with my kind of climate science facilitator or trainer type of hat. So yes, there's an element of some, it's like the pyramid of needs, but at the same time, if you look at, the climate science and the consequences of climate change, for instance, and inequality, I think, unfortunately, the hardest consequences fall on the poorest people, on minorities. So I think it depends how you frame it, and sustainability might be an elaborate word, but when you talk about, the end game and the increase of inequalities, the problem of access to food, land, and health consequences of climate change, it does become a problem that affects more the poorest, in our societies and at a global level. So yeah, that's my answer.
What's your view, Philippe?
Well, it's sometimes it's a bit difficult for me to say, because I belong to the privileged category who can think about other concerns than just earning a living to feed the family. So it's a kind of a luxury for me. Now, how would I behave if I were, let's say, in a really poor area, and what I have to do is simply to do whatever task is thrown at me in order to feed my family. Yeah, there is an element of that, and I don't have it's not an easy question. I mean, I didn't expect you to find a solution, or me or anybody else, but it's still hanging a bit in the background.
The other aspect is that when you look at carbon emissions globally, I think 80 or 90% of emissions are produced by the 49th richest. So again, with great power comes great responsibility and large emissions. So it's also up to those who are emitting the emissions, making the decisions, making the investment decisions to shape the world towards a net zero economy and a fairer world for everyone as well.
Yes, that's right. But at the same time, as you very well know, because you're a climate specialist, we have authorized the developing countries to emit more carbon because they are on their path to development. So in other terms, we allow them to burn more carbon, or to go into polluting industries, because we consider that this is the sort of right path in order to develop themselves. So it's a little bit paradoxical, because if you had to invest money in one of those countries, you would probably feel that yes, it will do good to invest into this cement factory, because it will allow to build more homes and roads and all kind of things. But at the same time, it's a very polluting cement factory. So it's a dilemma, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. Well, I think it's it's a matter of I think awareness and wisdom in a way. So we come from a period of amazing growth and great development, and wealth is often associated with education as well. So you have the highly educated people who are also wealthy, who are then aware of the dangers and the risks of climate change, and they're more they can be more sensitive, let's say, because of their high education. But that relationship is not always linear, because imagine the indigenous groups in Africa or South America who have a very high level of wisdom and are still living in harmony, let's say, with nature, and in very let's say balanced societies. So there are elements of the, let's say, the developed highly sophisticated societies that we're part of, that are not necessarily in tune with more sustainability, because we as a society have, created also negative effects like, consumerism, excessive consumerism, or, buying things, because they're fashionable, not because, we really need them. So I think it goes back to, what is the level of wisdom of a specific, society in a specific country, which you can call it consciousness as well. And so, moving away from a very egoistic, egocentric profit maximization in terms of the company, or GDP maximization in terms of the country, to a worldview where, we realize that we are all, brothers and sisters on one planet. And so, that's really, the challenge. And the second thing that, I'm really fascinated by technologies that can make the connection between sustainability and, environmental sustainability and financial profitability. So, anything to do with, clean technologies or innovation in agriculture that we see, at the moment. So, we are looking at companies that produce, power and heat from the sun. We are, working with companies who are producing natural compounds to extend the shelf life of fresh produce, to reduce food waste. So it's really amazing when you can see, these entrepreneurs coming up with solutions that actually align the environmental sustainability to the economic sustainability. And in that case, you actually have a total, a total alignment of the planets. And it's not anymore about, just the wealthy, being comfortable enough to, to worry about, sustainability.
Thank you for the question. There is another question from Valentine. Let me pick it up. Around, have you come across any best practice that would enable the company to specifically and openly target female-only candidates for board positions, and that doesn't open the company to the risk of accusations of gender-biased recruitment? Yeah, that's a really good one. A few thoughts on this. So I was listening to a podcast from the ECB with a really amazing lineup of women. So Christine Lagarde, Janet Yellen, and Ursula von der Leyen. And they were talking about, gender equality and female empowerment. And Christine Lagarde was saying, very bluntly, yes, we absolutely need some quotas of some sort if we want to bridge the gap, because otherwise, if we leave it to their goodwill, it's never going to happen. So there is this element of, saying that you have some objectives or KPIs of having a good representation of minorities on your board. And I think this is, I see a lot of organizations just publicly saying that in, charities, in the impact space, not only in the more, corporate world. And then you also have the, how you process this, how do you get to that result? And so there's also lots of things in terms of process. So of course, a good analogy is when you have your recruitment panel, I think should also reflect that diversity, which might sometimes be tricky because you kind of have to start somewhere. But I think, with investments decisions, there's a lot of female funders have said, for instance, that they are sick and tired of pitching to only males, especially if they work in more impact space or even like, femtech and so on. So, and in terms of processes, there's a lot of new solutions that are existing out there to remove all the biases in the recruitment process. I mean, I'm thinking about one called Applied, which really asks questions related to the role to measure skills and experience. And then once you have a shortlist, there's also I've read some things around having a quota as well in your shortlist of candidates. So at least making sure that the candidates that are being reviewed at the later stage also reflect your diversity objectives, which doesn't mean that if you have to select just one person, his background or her background will be that important, but at least you have the shortlist. So I think it's really defining the KPIs in the process and then looking at the tools. I mean, I'm sure you'd find a lot of things online on this topic.
Thank you, Mary. That was really informative.
Next question, maybe this one for you. Talking about indigenous people, what is your view on impact investment in benefit of native communities without imposing Western savior ideals through the investment? Yeah, that's an interesting.
I was wondering if Valentine wants to answer this, because he's been involved with this type of projects. Valentine, are you there?
Yes, I am.
And yes, applied is the one I was talking about, Valentine. Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think that one of the most important things, I think, when it comes to trying to get as much capital as possible into indigenous communities, which is something that I worked on for a couple of years, is going to the indigenous communities and asking them what they want to achieve, rather than going with some preconceived idea of what would be best for them. So invariably, if you do go with a preconceived idea, you're going to be proven wrong very quickly, and that whatever it is that you've got in mind is almost certainly not what they need, or it's a very suboptimal solution. So really the capital should be put to use in facilitating their needs, and they are the experts on what they need. Yeah, there's a specific term for it. I'm afraid I can't remember what it is. There's a very interesting guy called Dr. Ciroli, who has spent a very, very long time working with indigenous communities and doing something called enterprise facilitation. Dr. Ernesto Ciroli. He's got a TED talk on the subject, which is very interesting. It's called Shut Up and Listen. And he tells a very funny story about when he went to an indigenous community as a young sort of specialist, and was very enthusiastic about getting them to grow Italian vegetables, and made a tremendous success of growing all these vegetables, until the moment that a herd of hippopotamuses rushed over the horizon and devoured the entire lot. And he said, the hippopotamuses. And they said, yes, the hippopotamuses, because of course they'd known about it all along. And I think it's a very, very interesting point. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, very helpful, Valentine. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with with your view, and I think it's a matter of showing respect for other people, instead of coming in as arrogant Westerners, with all the answers, right?
Absolutely,
and also having the humility to be able to learn as well, because I think there is so much that we can still learn from indigenous communities. I mean, I don't really know much about the topic, but I'm fascinated by the fact that there are elements of how they organize their societies and the way that they live in harmony with nature that really can lead us to learn a lot about the topic. But thank you so much, Valentine.
Pleasure.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one more.
Sure.
So just an open floor question, really. What do you think can be done to empower young people to enter the impact investing sphere?
My first my quick answer would be to really work on the education sector. So looking at ways in which schools can really make kids more sensitive around topics of sustainability, and understanding the connection between finance and sustainability. So the impact that we have, with our behavior, but also with our investments. So increase the sensitivity, but with that. So supporting initiatives also that work with schools in that respect. And I see this as very powerful also because kids can then go back home and share their learnings with their families. So it can be really accelerating the development of increased awareness. Any other suggestions?
I have one. Hey.
Hello, Sophia.
Hi, Alessandro. Good to see you. Great job. Very quickly, I'd say empowering young people, particularly around investing or impact, is really important, I feel, for the young people to get to know themselves sometimes, maybe first, because there's so many verticals, issues, things, and many things can be very exciting. But because being young as well, it's also like a formative part of their development. So to find out their interests first, have some sort of assessment or a way of being able to perhaps use this opportunity to, as yes, get engaged, but not forget to learn and not forget who they are, because they themselves can come up with the next great venture that is not because the market said this or the adults, the grown-up has said that, right? That is in the heart and the visions of the young people that our futures in general lie as well. Everybody's, right? But particularly, I think, when you're young. So I think that's an important thing. Not forget who you are. So have an assessment to have that kind of benchmark, and then go towards your interests and take that as an opportunity to learn more about yourself, but also about the world. Because we need that energy, but also we need that seed that everyone carries. And I think at youth, we're more connected with it more than when we are, a little maybe skeptical or already jaded from what people tell us what's possible and not possible.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Sophia. Very good point. All right, on this note, I think we can close off the webinar. These are our contacts details if you want to reach out to us, Marie and Alessandro. Thank you all very much for joining us today. It was great, great questions, very much appreciated. And yeah, we look forward to staying in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandro.
Thank you. Bye, Mara.
Bye.
Bye, Annika. Ciao, Mario. Bye, Valentine.
Bye. Bye, Alessandro.
Bye, Sophia. Bye, Annika.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.